All right. Well, welcome to the sixth edition of the Political Mic. I have with me a very distinguished guest, Mr. Chris Matthews. Um, Mr. Chris Matthews was raised in the suburbs of Philadelphia and graduated from the College of the Holy Cross in 1967. He studied economics at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill and served in the Peace Corps from 1968 to 1970. For the next 15 years, Matthews worked in politics and government, running unsuccessfully for the U.S. House of Representatives as a Democrat in '74. But during the Jimmy Carter administration, he served as a presidential speechwriter and as a press relations officer for the President's Reorganization Project, a program to restructure various executive offices, agencies, and departments. In the 1980s, he was the top aide for House Speaker Tip O'Neill. Mr. Matthews is an American journalist and political commentator, best known as the host of Hardball with Chris Matthews. Mr. Matthews, thank you so much for joining me today. I wanted to start off by, I guess, addressing an issue that so many folks seem to be concerned about surrounding the mail-in ballot system, the Postal Service. Recently, the Postmaster General had proposed to make some changes to the Postal Service, and now recently he kind of backed down from, after being questioned by House Democrats. So, Mr. Matthews, do you think that the confusion and some of the apathy combined with the confusion surrounding whether or not people can submit their mail-in ballots, do you think that would have a negative toll on the voter turnout, or do you think this virus has just, I guess, played such a significant role in so many average Americans' lives that they're going to be turning out in large numbers no matter what?
Well, I think Donald Trump is very effective at messing with the minds of his opponents. He did it with Marco Rubio. He did it with Jeb Bush. People are rarely at their best when they go in the ring with this guy. It's almost like an old Muhammad Ali bout where he would mess with the mind of the other guy. The other guy would be a good guy like Joe Frazier, but by the time he got in the ring, he didn't know what he was doing. It was a very successful psy war that Muhammad Ali was engaged in. He was obviously one of the great boxers of all times, but he's also a brilliant magician of the mind. And I think that Trump does the same thing. And I think this time he's messing with the minds of the voters. I think he's trying to take away the confidence that most people have. Well, we've always had that when we go into the voting booth, our vote will be counted, and it will count. Hold on, I don't know how this happened, but I'm sorry. I have a lot of company here I didn't ask for tonight. No, thank you. People call me. Anyway, I think what I'm worried about is that people will begin to wonder if there'll be an honest count, whether Trump will actually leave office. I don't think there's a doubt, but people do have that doubt. That the effectiveness of your vote, which there's a great feeling when you, just a second. What this is. Hello, Jerry. Hey, Michael, can you take this phone? Tell me to come up and get my phone. I put this large ringer in because I'm doing a radio interview tomorrow morning at 7 o'clock in the morning, and I want to make sure I wake up. I get this humongous ringer. No, I think it's scary because with the first Article 1 of the Constitution, as you know, provides for a postal service. It's part of their constitutional responsibilities of the federal government to have a postal service, and they start messing with that. You wonder about things like impeachable offenses. Well, my God, we're on the verge of those kinds of things all the time now. Unfortunately, the gears have been stripped on that process. You say impeachment, it's like, oh yeah, what else is there? But I think the idea of a president messing with his executive responsibility to see that the postal materials are delivered on time. Now, of course, this is strange because in some states you have rules like, I understand North Carolina, I believe that they have a rule that if the mail isn't in that day, not just postmarked that day, election day, but it has to be in and received by the election commissions, then it won't count. And we have thing in Florida back in 2000 where there was two different rules. One was you should try to find out what the voter meant, whether they made a mistake with the chat or something else. But also there was a deadline. There wasn't enough time to determine all the intentions in the recount. So these laws are only good. It seems to be our election system's only good if it's a landslide. We don't have a good election system for tight elections. And I think that's pretty clear now. We're not really good at the close count. Remember, Al Franken had the close count with Norm Coleman, and you had an Indiana close count in the 80s. And we're just not that really precise in our mechanisms. That's the problem. And it's scary this time because I think Biden should win, comfortably enough that it isn't going to be an issue of the result. But just a second. I'm sorry about this.
We're going to resume. We're going to continue shortly. There's a little technical difficulties on Mr. Matthews' end, but basically he is just reaffirming, the fears that so many people have in terms of Trump causing there to be much doubt in terms of the the citizenry's mind in terms of what would result in November. Would there be voter fraud, like many people are alleging would happen when you have a lot of mail-in ballots being casted? Would there be faith in the result of the election, no matter the outcome? And so Mr. Matthews was just emphasizing the need for us to realize that.
I'm back.
Go ahead, sir. I'm sorry.
Well, that's the point. I think it's a scary thing, but maybe he's pulling back from that, as you said. Maybe he's pulling back from this attempt to intimidate the voter into not showing up, and therefore he can hope to win.
Now, I was also thinking about, the political backlash that may result from, any kind of attempt that may seem on the voters' minds of undermining the Postal Service. For instance, Maine is very heavily dependent on the Postal Service. There are folks, that you hear all the time, even in the convention, the messaging is around folks who are going to be no longer receiving the prescription medicine on time because of the potential moves by the Postmaster General. Now that he's backed off, do you think that that's enough to kind of turn the tide back in Trump's favor in terms of senior citizens and folks who, just had, even outside of election reasons, the need to depend on a postal service in this age of a pandemic when everyone's restricted inside? Oh, you're on mute. Click the mute button. Yeah.
People's retirement checks and Social Security are all generally electronically done now, so it isn't really that much. We don't really require snail mail for that. But we're only learning this stuff now about it. People requiring, getting their mail. I know I get a lot of solicitations for medicine, for prescriptions by mail. So clearly everything. I mean, Amazon is through the roof because right now people. I was just up here on the island of Nantucket, going out to the recycling center, and you know what the main thing is that people are bringing back? All these people, cardboard boxes. Huge, dump of cardboard boxes to recycle because people are getting everything delivered by mail. Everything. It's either UPS or it's FedEx or it's the Postal Service, and so that has to become. And we were in that direction before the pandemic struck. But I think now more and more, it's going back to where it was when you weren't around back in the early 50s, when people would get everything delivered. Parents with young babies would have the diapers clean diapers sent back and forth. You know what I mean? You get everything. They come and collect the diapers, and then they take them back. And you get clean diapers, and we would get soda delivered, milk delivered. We would get potato chips delivered by Charles Chips. So it's like we're reverting back to this dependence on a regular daily deliveries. You know, and I think it's you can't screw with that.
Do you think this could have an effect on the down ballot races? For instance, the Senate races in Arizona with Mark Kelly, the race in North Carolina where you have Cal Cunningham basically neck and neck in polling with the incumbent. Do you think that this could affect Lindsey Graham's?
Where I see it going, since I think about this all the time. I think Mark Kelly's had a good lead and he's going to hold it. I think the astronaut background, what happened to his wife, being a target of an assassination attempt. I think that the latest number I saw was that Cunningham was up by 10. I went to graduate school, as you pointed out, in North Carolina. I have a great faith in that state's good sense, and I think that I think Cunningham's going to win that one. There's something unpopular about Tellis. You never realize these things until late in their first term, but something's not working for him. I think the hard one to call. Well, a couple of hard ones to call. I think Iowa. I think Maine's going to be hard to call right into the last day. I mean, a lot of people, personally, I really like Susan Collins, personally. I don't know how I would vote up there, but I've always liked her personally. And she's a former Senate staffer like I was. And I think she's salt of the earth. But, the voters up there are going to have to make up their mind whether they want a Republican anymore. And I do notice over time that people that are in the wrong state politically, in other words, from Gordon Smith out in I think it was out in Oregon, you can survive for a while being the wrong senator. In other words, ideologically, you don't fit, but eventually it catches up to you. The people say, I like this person, but they don't vote the way I would. And eventually, even though you like the person, you go, it's Doug Jones's challenge down in Alabama. I mean, it's a conservative state. He's a Democrat. I mean, it's a challenge for him. He might pull an upset, but sooner or later, people go, I want somebody that speaks for me. And that's why the liberal states or the progressive states have progressive senators, and with few exceptions, like Ohio, where you've got Portman and you've got Sherrod Brown. Sherrod Brown, a real progressive, and Portman, a moderate Republican. But they're generally, that's what, in the time I lived, that was fairly common. States would have, like Iowa would have Grassley and would have somebody else on the other side, Harkin. And they lived with that sort of balance. They like that balance. But today it's polarized and people don't want a balance. They want a point of view, and progressive or conservative. And that means today, progressive or Trump. It's a pretty brutal choice.
And as you were speaking, I was thinking about, the fact that politics has changed even in these past 4 years. Even before COVID-19, there were so many crises. Before this, we were dealing with impeachment. Before that, we were dealing with the government shutdown. There seems to always be some huge news in this Trump era. And that coupled with people's fears. You're on mute.
Yeah, I think that what we saw in 2008 was pretty scary. I mean, it basically blew John McCain out of the water. I mean, right in the middle of the campaign, McCain was saying, let's hold off on the debate and all that stuff. And Barack Obama just charged ahead. He said, no, let's have an election because I'm going to win this thing. Let's have the election. I mean, they're going to have the debate. But it seems like they're carting the, 9/11, the Iraq War. It's almost rare now we have a peaceful period. And it's amazing how people forget the crises. They look kindly on W now. What happened to that? 200,000 people dead in Iraq, 4,000 Americans dead in a war that did nothing for anybody, and people like him because he's better than Trump. Well, that's a hell of a standard. And they like the Bush family because they're old money. Everybody likes the old class, and he gets forgiven for stuff he shouldn't be forgiven for. But we've had a lot of trouble lately. Not good trouble, as John Lewis would say. It's not good trouble, you know.
In terms of still, voter turnout, I was wondering, even without COVID-19 and the mail-in ballot process and the need for people to get to start the process early so that they can cast their ballots to vote, so they can request a ballot, place their address on it, the return address, get the mail-in ballot, fill it out, send it back. That coupled with the fact that there are voting ID laws in some states, and then you have got the Citizens United Supreme Court ruling still in place where corporations can donate
I think the voter ID thing was the voter ID trick, Michael, was a real trick in Pennsylvania where I grew up, and it was really admitted to by the party leaders and the head of the legislature. They were having a voter ID card proposal because they wanted to screw the poor person who lived in a row house. Because like my grandparents, they lived in a row house. They didn't have a car for most of their lives. They, when we would visit, they put the trash cans out to keep a parking space in front of the house. I mean, it's the old neighborhoods. People don't drive around; they walk, and they don't have driver's licenses. And if you don't have a driver's license, you had to go get a PennDOT, the Department of Transportation. There's like 4 in the city. You have to find out where that is. Take the subway to go get something that's a semblance of a driver's license. But it's not really a driver's license. All it does is let you vote. So clearly that was a deliberate attempt to slow down people's ability to even want to vote. It's such a trouble. And I think that was deliberate. Maybe in the long run, ID cards make sense, but you got to give people a lot of time to get them. You got to make them easy to get. And I'm all for voter integrity. I think the idea of an ID card is fine if everybody had one, but people who don't have driver's licenses don't have them. They don't have picture IDs. They're not working somewhere. So that was a trick. That was like a literacy test, or a polling.
Do you think these tactics? Right. Do you think these tactics could play a role when we're looking at battleground states like Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, where, for instance, in 2016, the Nation reported that 27,000 votes separated Trump and Clinton, where there were 300,000 registered voters who lacked strict forms of ID. Do you think that, in addition to the voter ID, the coronavirus effect, and all these other factors that may cause people to, I guess, lose faith, find as if, that it'll be in their best interest to sit this one out? Do you think voters would think that way? But there seems to be a lot of passion against Trump too. Do you think that's a fair assessment? Or
I don't see how. Look, I always look at it this way, Michael. You're at a party a week after the election, and your brother-in-law's there, your rival. Are you going to tell him you didn't vote? Are you going to let somebody in the family know that you didn't bother to vote? I don't think you want that out. I don't think you want people in your family who were already ripping you or challenging you or duking it out with you to know that you screwed up. And now this thing about you, look, I would like everything in the world to make it easier to vote. But in the end, you do have personal responsibility to get out there and do it. It's your vote. It's nobody else's. And we do know that if you don't vote, it counts. We know that if you vote, as Barack Obama said last night, in that beautiful speech of his last night at the convention, if you vote, I think it was he who said this, it was either he or one of the major speakers, if you vote for a hopeless cause, somebody who's not going to win, somebody, I'm not knocking anybody, but Ralph Nader, Jill Stein, one of those votes this year, you're really voting in a different way for Trump, probably, because you weren't going to vote for Trump. You were going to vote for the Democrat. So if you slit your vote, I've had friends of mine who I used to think, or otherwise would think of them as intelligent people, will say to me, I voted for Gene McCarthy in 76, 8 years after he even mattered. And I go, what? Well, what were you doing? Or with Reagan against Carter, they go vote for John Anderson. What were you doing? You knew he wasn't going to be getting any electoral votes. So it's about, we do know this, I think, from 16. It's about 270. It's not about the popular vote. It's about 270. And our system is set up, and I think it's the reason we have a two-party system, whereas in Europe and Israel and all those other places around the world, there's multi-parties, because unless you have the 270, you're not going to win. So it really comes down to a binary system. You're voting yes or not yes. You're voting for the incumbent or for the challenger. It's really the most basic kind of brutal kind of choice. But I think we got our lesson when we saw Hillary win by, millions of votes, 3 or 4 million votes, and then losing because she lost those 3 states. I think we got the message. It's about 270. Don't waste it. Don't waste your vote.
And one of the major issues in this election is the economy. Before COVID-19, it seemed as if Trump was skating to victory in November. But now that we've had this virus and this pandemic and the effect it's had on businesses and the effect it's had on unemployment rates, it seems as if the tide has turned largely in due because of the virus to Biden's favor. But then, I saw a Wall Street Journal poll where it said that Trump's approval rating on the economy is 5 points above water. And a Pew poll also revealed that folks prefer Trump as the manager of the economy by 3 points. And my confusion is, how can it be? How was Trump able to successfully convince folks that he was more suited to handle the economy when he inherited a strong economy with the Obama-Biden administration? And how is he able to convince voters who remember Biden just 4 years ago as part of that administration?
Well, clearly, Michael, the market is up. S&P are up. The big companies, Amazon, companies like that are doing really well. And they saw a boom economy until this year, until March, I guess. And they don't know anything about Joe Biden's economics because he hasn't really explained anything. All they know is that Trump had a boom economy for a while. Trump's going to have to shift. I don't think his advantage is relatively, as you said, economics, his least comparative disadvantage because he's not as bad on the economy as he is on everything else. I don't think he can shift to that as long as we have the virus. And I think he's going to have to blame the virus on Biden. I really do think that will be his last chance to it's going to be something that you and I find. He's going to say Hunter Biden was getting paid $50,000 or whatever a month from somebody over in China, and that's why China was able to do something with the virus to our disadvantage. I really think he's got to do a ghastly indictment of Biden on Corona to get himself out of this mess. And I don't think we have any doubt about his ruthlessness, that he will do what it takes.
Do you think he can still
blow? So just get emotional.
Do you think he could still successfully, I guess, portray Biden as someone to blame for the virus when it seemed as if, this whole year he was trying to tax. He was trying to say Biden would just be an empty vessel for the hard left. He was trying to say Biden was incompetent, but everything he tried to throw didn't stick. And it seemed to backfire, especially when you've got this added factor of the Lincoln Project putting out ads that really show or display the hypocrisy of him, for instance, going after his competency when he takes to the Rose Garden and says, oh, there's ways to handle the virus through injection of lights and bleach and different things like that. Do you think that plus the fact that Biden seems to be more responsible, wearing masks in public, the DNC is all virtual, Trump still seems to want to have more of a rally? Just today he had a rally. Do you think that message will still stick?
I don't think it'll stick, but I think he will shoot it. I think he'll do it because he has to. Michael, he has no alternative now but to play offense. He can't defend his record on coronavirus. He can't. He will not win on that issue. The public wants to blame somebody for this thing, and they're going to blame him. That's appropriate. He's the person in charge. He's the chief executive. He's the one who's told us what to do. He's the one that should be of choreographing all the governors to work together. He should have been the ones working hand in glove with Cuomo and the rest of them, and Whitmer, and Gavin Newsom and all the rest of them. I think he's not been doing that. He has let it drop. He's let the whole thing drop, and it's failed. And we've had 100 and all these. We're going to have 200,000 deaths probably by election day, and that's a problem, and that's a mark against him. So he has to find some way to shift the blame. So I'm telling you, and you know this, and everybody watching, he's quite ruthless. And he's already going after Kamala and saying that she's not a citizen, or playing that game, the birther game. And think about this. His willingness to say something that we all know, listening to it, isn't true, but knows that some people will give him the benefit of the doubt. For example, he says, her parents are from Jamaica and from India. Okay. Does that make her not an American citizen? Well, the 14th Amendment, as you know from your education, the 14th Amendment is quite clear. If you're born in this country, you're American. It's so simple. And most people assume that even it wasn't the 14th Amendment. They said, if you're born here, you're American. That's what American is. You're somebody born in America. That's who a person is. A person born here is American. So he actually says, no, because her parents weren't born here. Well, where did that come from? He just makes it up. And people overwhelmingly know it's nonsense. But he says it because it'll capture, he'll give it to somebody who's a bigot or whatever, one little bit of excuse to say, I got nothing against her background, but I don't think she's here legally. I mean, who is he talking to? The people that buy into whatever he says, and it has nothing to do with the truth. It just has attitude behind it, just attitude. I don't like it.
And I guess along the same veins, another, I guess, poll that surprised me were the polls pertaining to the Hispanic voters. Newsweek revealed that the latest national survey showed that 44% of those who said if the election was held today, they'd vote for Biden, and 40% said Trump. And I'm confused because even today, where you see Bannon being arrested and charged for defrauding an effort to try to improve the border wall and add to it and make sure that people have more of a difficult time of getting to this country, becoming citizens. Why is it that he's able to convince so many Hispanics, do you think, to continue to support him?
Well, I think it's always dangerous to assume that people who are not wealthy, that there should be liberals or progressives, because a lot of people that come to this country from the South, from Latin America, are not really happy with government. They don't like government. They've had terrible governments in many cases. That's why they left. That's why they're refugees. And terrible governments. You come from Haiti or someplace. I mean, I saw Haiti, people were drinking. I saw a kid drinking out of a pothole. They didn't even have water for the people. I mean, it's just terrible governments. And the other thing is they're very entrepreneurial. A lot of Mexican Americans, for example, are very entrepreneurial. They want to start a business, or people come from Puerto Rico. They're Americans, but they come to the mainland. They want to start a business. They don't think in terms of government jobs or working for somebody. They think in terms of starting something on their own. There's a lot of that out there. We know that. Look at the craftsmen that you come in contact with who come to this country who may not be even here illegally or not, but they can fix a screen. They can paint a house beautifully. They have tremendous crafts, and they want to get paid for that. So I can see where there's a Republican point of view there. I think Cuban Americans are very anti-communist, very anti-Castro. I just said the Cold War. I'm with them on that one. Everybody is hoping for a big government solution to everything. I think they look in terms of what they can do, opening up a shop, a flower shop, a bodega, opening up something small, but their own. I'm for that. I think it's great. That's America too. It's American. You want your own business. I think even at my age, I think, how come I've never had a business? I had a paper route. I mean, I had a lot of jobs in my life, but I always worked for somebody. But some people are good at starting businesses. And I think a lot of minorities, especially Latinos who come from Mexico, and small business is a big part of their aspiration, And the Republicans are a pro-business party, historically.
I heard someone make the point that the stimulus checks can also play a role in I guess, the support Trump is experiencing with the Latino community. To your point, Mr. Matthews, with the the fact that Latinos are very entrepreneurial. So do you think that the upcoming stimulus check, which would be far less, I know that the first one gave a $600 unemployment benefit, and now they're trying to scale it back to 200. GOP senators Do you think that a less generous bill would reduce support among not just the Latino community, but across the board?
Michael, I don't know. I think I don't know if people are still open to shifts in opinion right now. I mean, the polls I've seen don't show a lot of undecided voters. We have a fight. To me, that's tight. It's moving markets. I'll go back to what I said when we started at the end. They've gone to the mattresses. They say The Godfather. They've gone to the mattresses. This is the real election. And I think people are going to be trying to decide their ballot what to do before they get it. I don't think this thing was last minute. And I do think everybody I talk to, people like Chuck Todd and all these people that really know their politics, believe that history shows that when you're in bad times, we're in double-digit unemployment, uncertainty like we've never seen about what's going to happen early next year when the economy continues to suffer from everybody out of work and not going to work, that's going to help Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, because when you're in doubt, you're never going to say to yourself, this is as good as it gets. You're never going to say, this guy Trump's as good as we get. There's nobody better than this around. Well, there's always going to be somebody better than Trump. It's just in this environment, you have to be hopeful and optimistic. And you have to say, it's got to be. Somebody's got to do a better job than this guy. In the country, say, this is as good as we get. This, the optimism that we're used to in this country. I'm not a kumbaya guy about this stuff, but I think the American people are not going to put up with this crap. They're just not going to say, they've never seen a president like this before. It doesn't seem to, as Barack Obama said last night, I keep waiting for him to take the job seriously. It was so fundamental, his indictment. It's so basic to say this guy doesn't take the job seriously. I've never heard anybody say that about a president. They can say he's too conservative or too liberal. You know, I never heard him say he didn't take the job seriously. And they didn't say that about Carter. They didn't say that about Nixon. They didn't say that about Jerry Ford. Everybody gets at least the break of assuming they're trying their best. Not this guy. They don't think
even W.
Brock said the other night, last night, he's not doing his best. He's not. That's an amazing.
I wanted to ask you, because since World War III, we've only had two presidents that have been one-term presidents, and that was your boss, your former boss, Jimmy Carter, and George H.W. Bush. And you remember in the late 1970s, there was the oil embargo, there was the hostage crisis, and there seemed to be a lot of stress in the country. And it seemed to, public opinion ruled against Jimmy Carter, and his call for conserving energy it wasn't received well. And then there seemed to be an opportunity for Reagan to become the positive, optimistic, shining city on a hill candidate, articulating a message that seemed to be more positive, and it resulted favorably for him. And then in '92, you got George H.W. Bush. He was, I believe, the last president to serve in World War II. He was the last president of the previous generation before the baby boomers. He just had a previous big victory with Desert Storm in '91. His polling was skyrocketing, and all of a sudden the recession hits. Bill Clinton has an opportunity to present himself as someone who empathizes with the average person's pain. In this case, do you see any parallels between those two situations with Biden, where he has made himself the empathetic candidate and Trump seems to be the candidate that he seems to be a little tone deaf? Do you see a similar result also coming out of it?
Well, your history here. I mean, in 1991, in March, Bush was up around 80 to 90% because he just won the Gulf War. And from March to October, it kept coming down. He was below 60. And then he saw what happened in Pennsylvania when Harris Wofford beat Richard Thornburg. A total upset of 40%. I mean, that was the one run by Carville, James Carville, and the other guys, Pat Cadell and Paul Begallo. They pulled something was going on. That's when Bush got the word. Times have changed. This big shot isn't going to win. Thornburg was a big shot, big establishment figure. All of a sudden, the public wasn't interested in establishment figures. They want somebody that cared about their problems. And when Bill Clinton came along, and you're really smart about the history because Bill Clinton didn't serve in the military, but every president, starting with Ike, was in World War II. Ike, Kennedy, Johnson, briefly, Carter. Carter was on naval summer. He was on his summer, whatever called, tour of the Navy from Annapolis that summer. We dropped the bombs in Japan. But all those people, all the way through George Bush Sr., all those guys served in World War II. It was an amazing run. And all of a sudden, the Cold War was over in August of 1991 when Boris Yeltsin stood up on the Soviet tank and basically faced down the Red Army. That was the end of the Cold War. There wasn't going to be a big war. We weren't going to have bombs. We weren't going to have a third war, nuclear war. None of that was going to happen because Boris Yeltsin stood up to those guys. He said, no more of this. We're going to have a democracy in Russia. So Bill Clinton comes along, and not only is the first boomer, but he's the first guy that didn't serve in the military. It didn't hurt a bit. And then the town hall Oprah style debate, it was called, where it was very much asked, how does the federal debt or deficit affect your family personally? And George Bush, who's not a bad guy, had no idea what she was talking about because he didn't help explain to the audience what she was talking about. It was not the deficit, it was the recession, the overall economic situation. And he kept saying to her, what do you mean? What do you mean? And Bill Clinton jumps up, he walks out toward her, he practically embraced her, and you know exactly what you're talking about. You're talking about the rich people are from the same economic problems that the regular people do when the government screws up. And Bill Clinton, well, we know Bill, he bites his lower lip and he gets totally emotional. And I think it's real and he connects. And I think you got it all right there, Michael. You got all the pieces to it. The end of the Cold War, the lack of military service, the lack of empathy by the elite, by the establishment. And then Bill Clinton comes along and he completely identifies with that young woman and her concerns and her skepticism. In this election, I think Biden is another case of an empathetic figure. I think that's one of the things he's true. I take the Amtrak once in a while, not once in a while, I take it a lot. You know, New York to Washington, Washington, New York. All those women that work on the Amtrak, when you talk to them, the people that work in the snack bars on those cars, they all know Joe Biden because Biden comes up to them and has his picture taken. He talks to their mothers. Yeah, it's all true. That's who he is. He's a schmoozer, you know. And I think I don't think Trump would do that. I think a lot of politicians wouldn't do that. They wouldn't use their time that way. But Biden lives for that, connecting with people. And he's from a state that's very small. It's basically a local office, U.S. Senator. I don't think it's as big as a congressional district, a normal congressional district. And it has one big city, Wilmington, and then it has wealthy suburbs, and it's got a rural southern part of the state. But the urban part is heavily African American, and I get the feeling that he has a lot of contacts there and a lot of people he knows personally. And I think he's been doing that since 1972. He's been running in that community. So I think you're going to see a lot of that in this campaign. Kamala's going to help too.
When you mentioned
she's more elite, you might say, more elite. But she's had all the great schools and like yours, you know, and she's California. And he's sort
before I move on to
back east, neighborhood stuff. Go ahead.
Before I move on to the Senator Harris's effect, I was curious because you had mentioned the effect that the end of the Cold War uh, should have had for George H.W. Bush's chances in the fall of '92. But 8 days ago, Trump signed a historic deal between Israel and the United Arab Emirates in hopes of advancing peace and prosperity in that region. I also am a follower of Professor Alan Lichtman and his 13 keys to predicting who's going to win the White House. And one of the keys is whether there is a major foreign policy victory. Do you count that as a major foreign policy victory, or is it falling on deaf ears with this pandemic?
Uh,
You're on mute. Mr. Matthews, you're on mute.
About the deal with the Emirates by Netanyahu was that he pulled back on his plan to annex most of the West Bank. And I think that would have been horrible. It would have killed the chances for a Palestinian state of any kind. And everybody knows it would have ruined the political situation of a friend of ours, Abdullah, king of Jordan. It would have killed us with a lot of the Sunni leaders in that region, because it would have said there's no reason playing ball with the West. They're going to sell you out to Israel. They're just going to sell you out again. And that hurts our relationships over there. I don't think Trump has been good, because any decent American president knows he has two jobs in the Middle East. One, for political reasons and other good reasons, we're friends of Israel. Totally accept that. But the other hat he or she has to wear is the peacemaker over there, the one who brings all sides together and takes everybody's side fairly and doesn't screw the Arab side. And it's a tricky business to be an American president with our relationship with Israel being so close. But a good president, Eisenhower was one, a few others. You got to be honest, an honest broker over there. Or how can we have any relationship with an Arab country if every single time we take Israel's side? Why would they want to deal with us at all? So I think Trump was playing that game. He was Netanyahu's friend. He was backing him up. He was letting Jared Kushner and his son-in-law were talking about, they were going along with the annexation. Thank God this Emirates thing came along. But a lot of that has to do with the historic challenge to the Arab world, especially the Sunni Arab world of Iran and Iran's militants. That doesn't seem to moderate, does it? They seem to always be militant about the West, and they're militant against the Sunnis who run most of those countries.
So I wanted to move on to the effect that Senator Harris may have on the Democratic ticket this year. I have to admit, Mr. Matthews, even though she went to Howard, I was actually going for Senator Warren, and partly because I thought that Warren was the closest candidate out there that would kind of, I guess, give an olive branch to the Bernie wing of the party. Do you think that, because it was also hard to see what base Kamala Harris brings to the ticket, because she dropped out in December due to fundraising reasons. She qualified for that December debate, but she didn't take the stage just because she didn't have enough, fundraising. Elizabeth Warren, on the other hand, I think earlier this summer did a teleconference with Biden, raises $7 million for him. So she had that effect. So where Biden was weak in terms of fundraising, Warren seemed to be strong. Do you think that the effect of Senator Harris would help or improve or have no effect on Biden's chances in the Rust Belt, or in this battleground states like Pennsylvania, Arizona?
Well, there's so many strains now that I thought that Harris picked up one last night. She went to an historically black college. She went to maybe the number one historically black institution in the country, Howard, and she's a member of a sorority. And I think all the other sororities that are associated with that kind of elite schooling in the African American community, I think she's tied into a lot of that. She's tied in because of her father through the Caribbean communities. She has the South Asian connection. But I think in terms of directly your answer, I think her sort of meritocratic background with her high education, law school and AG, Attorney General and all that, I think she's going to impress a lot of the women in the suburbs who are better educated. I think women with better educations are going to go to her and forget the ethnic thing. I think they're going to look at her as one of theirs, somebody like theirs who made it by school. In the same way, I think they're going to like, and they will like, already do like Jill, Dr. Biden, because of her elevation through education, that she's moved up ahead in our society through education. I think people who have done that themselves, I've known it through my life, the people who really have got good educations like other people with really good education. They just do. It may not be fair, but it does. And I think that's where Kamala is going to appeal to the women in the suburbs. They're going to be proud of her, I think, if she runs a good campaign. I think I said he was going to pick her months ago. I wrote a big piece for the San Francisco Chronicle about this and said he wants somebody around the corner on the hall in the West Wing that he can call in, as he was called in. He told me once 5 times a day by Brock for advice. Somebody's going to be inside the tent with him, not pushing an agenda, being with him. I think Elizabeth Warren would have come on strong as an advocate for her causes. And every time she walked in the room, her agenda would come in with her. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's what she's there for. That's why she's a U.S. Senator, that agenda. I think he wanted somebody who's going to be a partner who didn't have, I'm just guessing, no, I'm not. I think he wanted somebody who's going to help him strategize politically to get through the agenda they're going to put together between the left and the center left, and how they're going to do it from the inside. I think Bernie's going to have tremendous influence on the agenda, on the platform. I think more than we can imagine, Bernie. I get the feeling that he decided he can't win. He couldn't win this year. He couldn't win a general, probably. That he decided, I'm going to go on the inside and become Biden's #1 advisor on policy. And I really do think there's a personal relationship there. There is with her too, with Elizabeth Warren, but I get the feeling that Biden is a good guy personally, and I think he always treated Bernie Sanders with respect. He never treated him like a flake or a fringe candidate, what other people did. And I think, hey, look, Elizabeth Warren's going to be a major figure. I watched her last night. She was something. But Biden's got to figure out who he is and what he isn't. And he's got to take as much of the progressive agenda as he can and draw the line somewhere and say, no, I'm not going that far. And I think that's going to be very interesting to watch, because if he looks like a surrogate for Bernie, he won't succeed. If he looks like he listens to Bernie, he could succeed. I think that's the difference.
Yeah, and I really liked your assessment on the effect Warren would have had as an advocate. But I was curious, do you think that Kamala Harris does help him with progressives? I know a lot of folks have, in recent months or weeks, have been critiquing her record on criminal justice. But I always say, as much as you can find to critique, you can find to point at and say, well, she was a progressive in many ways. She had implemented a program in California to divert folks from going straight from school to prison by having these programs in place to help get minority young men off of that trajectory, and other progressive ideas that were adopted by other states. Do you think that's enough to win her over with the Bernie folks, or do you think
we'll effect? See. I think we're going to get. I keep looking at different polls that suggest about half the progressives are not aboard. I saw number 28% weren't thrilled with her selection. That tells me that there's a portion of the party that has to still be won over. But saying you don't like the appointment doesn't mean you're not going to vote for the ticket. It's still binary, as I said. You got a choice. And years ago, John Kenneth Galbraith said something that was so brilliant, and I keep banging it around in my head. He said something. He was the great economist, a big liberal economist. Agriculture was his area. He said every new idea has to be 2/3 old. So when you come up with an idea, you got to sell it. You got to sell it as 2/3 old, or else people get too antsy about it. For example, when Kennedy sold Medicare. Johnson got it through. Medicare, just what we have now for people over 62 or 65. He had to say, it will be paid for through Social Security. That's how he said it on the air when he went campaign. Just very calmly. Oh, this will be paid for through Social Security. But what does that mean? Paid for through Social Security. This is an expensive program. But it made people feel, oh, he's going to pay for it through Social Security. What the hell does that mean? So Bernie comes along, Senator Sanders, and they say Medicare for all because people are comfortable with the word Medicare. So let's call it Medicare for all. You got to sell it. You got to make it sound familiar. And that's why nobody calls it national health care, because it sounds too British, or certainly not socialism. So you come up with the right word for it. And a lot of that is marketing and the comfort you have with the practicality of the person selling it. And somebody said the other day, it was a big progressive, said FDR never talked about being a social democrat, or he never used the language of socialism. He said, I'm here to save capitalism. I'm trying to make the system work. So a lot of this, Bernie's manner didn't suggest the familiar. Biden suggests the very familiar, maybe too much the familiar. But, we've had Tory men with liberal programs before. Nixon did an awful lot of programming, ironically, all this environmental stuff and affirmative action was named. Who would believe that? Because
I
get they get the program through. And I think Biden and Bernie will work that together. That's what I think. 2 old, 1/3 new, make it seem more familiar, and you'll get it through.
So I was curious, when Biden was mulling, his next vice presidential pick, and it seemed as if Kamala Harris was going to be the pick. I was just curious because, I was just curious because, in the first debate in June last year, she went straight out the gate and hit him hard with the busing issue, even though that was not an issue that folks were thinking of at the top of their head at the time, or even now. It did look divisive. I was just wondering, do you think, because I'm thinking,
because I've been thinking about this too, but Michael,
yeah,
I just want to jump in because this is something I've been thinking about a lot. Way back in 1960, your history, 2 days before Kennedy picked LBJ as his running mate, 2 days before it, LBJ was out there saying Kennedy's father was for Hitler. He was for Hitler. He said that Kennedy had Addison's disease and he'd be dead if he weren't taking his cortisone shots, his steroids. I mean, it was brutal what he did to him. And he said that the Kennedy family were all in bed with Joe McCarthy. He said all this right at the convention, or his surrogates did. He did personally in most cases. And Kennedy says, no, I need this guy. I'm going to pick him. So Kennedy was ruthless about it. He said, I don't care what he said about me and my family. I need this guy to carry Texas and Georgia, and I'm going to pick him. Now, maybe that's what Biden said. Maybe Valerie, his sister, maybe Jill. Why you can't to a story. One of the great progressives of our time.
And to your point, Mr. Matthews, I was also, as we're wrapping up, thinking of the 1980 election with George H.W. Bush and Ronald Reagan. Bush calling Reagan's economic scheme voodoo economics, but Reagan goes ahead and chooses him to win the country club, I guess, Republicans. Reagan, of course, was the ideologue. George H.W. Bush, more of a moderate conservative than Reagan was. But I guess my concern was, when a piece broke out that Chris Dodd was taken back, that Kamala Harris didn't seem authentic enough. Do you think that the authenticity of the ticket, of her now saying, of course, in her speech last night, that we have to get out and vote for Joe, do you think voters would perceive that as just inauthentic when she just viciously went after him a year ago. Hold on, he's going to be coming back. Oh, there you are. Did you hear what I said? What I asked Mr. Matthews? Oh, you're on mute. You're on mute. You're on mute. Unmute your microphone.
I think I'm back on. Michael?
Yeah, you're back on.
Okay. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, I was just asking about the whether voters would perceive it as inauthentic. 1980 Bush chooses Reagan chooses Bush after Bush criticized Reagan for what he called voodoo economics in terms of Reagan's policy. Chris Dodd, I know a few weeks ago, expressed that he was concerned with Kamala Harris's, I guess, lack of remorse for going after him so hard. Do you think that voters would perceive that as inauthentic, or do you think that, at the end of the day, like you had mentioned, it'll be a binary choice? Folks will make a decision, either one or the other, and that will play no toll, and people will see politics as politics.
You just said it, Michael. It's politics. And that old expression, politics makes strange bedfellows, it really is true. You end up having alliances you normally wouldn't have. And that's how we come together. I mean, we have to compromise. And it used to be it was done geographically. I wrote this piece about Lincoln never met his vice president until after they were elected. What do you say about that? I mean, they just never met. It was a totally political decision to pick Hannibal Hamlin. People like Nixon never even had an office in the executive office. He was up on the Hill all the time. He had hardly any time at all with Eisenhower. They didn't know each other really. And I think Johnson was never part of in the loop. And I go back to what I said. Vice presidents today have an office in the West Wing of the White House, a few doors from the president. They are involved in every discussion practically. They're part of all the policy. They are on the team. They're a team member, a junior partner to the president. And that's the job description. It's not a political ally like Bernie or Elizabeth Warren. It's not that relationship. It's a relationship of a president and a junior partner who works with him and has his confidence and keeps all the secrets. By the way, that's a big part of this job. Whatever the president says in that room, you keep it to yourself. And I think that's something that I think he wanted to make sure he was good on that she was good on that. I think it's going to be a great ticket. I just think so. I think it's when Barack Obama and Michelle Obama get out there, and I just wish there was rallies right now. I don't care about Trump rallies. I wish there was a progressive center rally with those four people out there: Barack Obama, Michelle Obama, Kamala Harris, and Joe Biden. I want to see those four people out there. It's the future of the Democratic Party. I want to see it. By the way, I think one reason why Obama wanted Kamala, he wants to kill the white monopoly on the presidency. I think he's looking to the future. He thinks she has a chance to be president. And I think the other candidates were either for age reasons or whatever, weren't really likely to become president after this. But Kamala is in her 50s. She's the perfect age to become president now. In her early 60s, she'd be a perfect age to run. I think he's thinking of the future. I think President Obama is definitely thinking of the future.
Do you think they could win the Bobby Kennedy coalition? And what I mean by that is, you've written books on Bobby Kennedy. And when he died, there were, working class whites on one side of the track from New York to Washington, D.C., and on the other side, African Americans. Do you think he can win that coalition this election? Wait, press the button again.
Michael, I wouldn't be in heaven if that Democratic coalition came back. I'm not sure we have as a future. The white working class, for whatever reason, has become disaffected with the Democratic Party. They're very hard to get back. I look at the rural vote in Pennsylvania. I think it's going up for Trump. there's a resentment there of the Democratic Party that is going to be there a long time. I wish there wasn't, but I know too many friends, two people I know, relatives of mine, who are not going to vote for Biden. I got two brothers. I got two brothers that will vote for him, and two that won't. And last time I had three voted against him, but completely the other way and went for Buttigieg, my older brother. So I know what's going on in this country. I'm not one of these people that says I don't know any Trump people. I think that's part of the Democratic Party problem when they say I don't know any Trump people. Well, that's a problem. If you don't know anybody, what do you know about the country? You got to know somebody. Maybe the guy working for you is for Trump, but he never told you. But find out why he's for Trump. And I think that's part of our problem. We're all proud of our differences. We're proud to say I don't know any Trump people, and the Trump people says I wouldn't go near those people. I think that's a problem. We're segregated.
Mr. Matthews,
We're segregated by our politics now. We really are.
I want to thank you so much for joining me tonight. I want to give you the floor. Usually, on Hardball, you always end your segments with "Let me finish." So I want to go ahead and give you the political mic and let you have your own "Let me finish" segment right here.
Well, Michael, thank you. And I think the thing that we're really talking about with President Trump and the deficiency, the unique deficiency of this president. We've had presidents who have failed with their economic policy. We had Hoovervilles. He tried, but he didn't know what to do, and he's too frozen to do anything. We had Jimmy Carter, who I worked for, who just got involved with historic forces with the economy in the world and the energy crisis and all that, and just the gas lines and just the hostage taking, and they've failed. But this president has failed almost deliberately in one way. And President Obama was sort of getting at it last night. One of the hats the president wears is, first he's commander-in-chief of the military, which keeps us from military coups. He's chief executive of the government, Article 2. He runs the U.S. government. And so we know, in effect, head of his political party's legislative agenda. He's not a head of government actually like a prime minister, but he basically, or she basically runs the program of the majority party. But there's another hat he has, or she has, which is head of state, the symbol of the country, the person who personifies us in the world, who symbolizes at home, who makes us understand who we are as a people, who speaks to us in times of crisis, like Roosevelt, we have nothing to fear but fear itself, or speaks for us like Jack Kennedy, who said, Ich bin ein Berliner, we're with you, free people of Berlin. He speaks for us at our best. He speaks to us, or she does, when we're in trouble. They are the leader of the American people, and the state, they're the head of state of our country. It's not an office you can particularly define, but we know when we see it was Lincoln trying to explain the horror of the Civil War is because of slavery, that everything paid for by the whip will be paid back in blood by the sword. And understanding biblically what we've just been through in the Civil War, 600,000 dead people. Who is that figure today? We don't have anybody in that office today. There's nobody speaking for our country today in the world. We hope to hell he doesn't symbolize us in the world. He's not talking to NATO. He's not talking to world leaders. You wouldn't want him showing up at your funeral and somewhere in the world or at your wedding. He's not the symbol of this country. He doesn't even pretend to be. He doesn't even pretend to talk for us and to represent the best in America, who we are or what we're going through. You don't want him showing up at a funeral. I mean, Clinton was pretty good at that. Reagan was good at sometimes at that. But this president isn't even trying to represent us. He's not trying to be us at our best. He's not trying to speak for us or speak to us. It's extraordinary. He never talks to us except in this ridiculous. He was asked the other day by Jonathan Swan of Axios, what did you think of John Lewis? That was not a question put to somebody who didn't get invited to somebody's third grade birthday party. That wasn't addressed to little Donald Trump. It was addressed to the President of the United States. What does the President of the United States say about the loss and the legacy of John Lewis? He didn't know what the question was. He didn't even know what the question was. He didn't understand what he was being asked by Jonathan. Jonathan's an Australian. He's not even American. And he's saying, speak for America about John Lewis. Speak for our country and our history about John Lewis, who's been through everything from the Edmund Pettus Street, everything going back to the SNCC and everything he was involved with. Tell us what that means to our history. Trump says he didn't come to my inauguration. That's a third grade kid's answer. That's not a president of the United States answer. He should have stepped back and said, oh, you're asking me as president. Okay, as president of the United States, I recognize this man's extraordinary role in the civil rights struggle and therefore in our history. And I'm proud to have met him on several occasions or something like that, or even though we disagreed. But Trump doesn't even understand the question. That's what I want to get back to, the lack of understanding. He's our head of state. He represents us, to us and for us. And he doesn't even show up for that job. That's my closing thought for you, Michael. You got it here.
Mr. Thank you so much, Mr. Matthews. It's always a pleasure to hear your perspective. And I think it's needed. And I think the country needs it. And until you go back on the air again, you're always welcome to come back on the political mic. Oh, you're muted.
Thank you. I like being here. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Bye-bye. Michael, take care of yourself.
Thank you. You too, sir.